Hello there, I'm Michelle. I'm a licensed massage therapist in Washington, and I bring you MBLEx Massage and Bodywork licensing exam study resources here on YouTube. I have lots of videos for you to be able to learn a lot of stuff. And then also on my website, I've got lots of free resources. I've got great courses. I've got practice tests. You just go ahead and get on that link down below in this description or in the comment. There'll be a pinned comment that has a link to everything. But right now, what we're working on is working on a pathology series. I just finished presenting about the bones of the body, bony landmarks. I just talked about the functions and structures of the skeletal system. And then finally, I'm closing out the whole section of the skeletal system to teach you about joints. So we're gonna be talking about the joints of the body, why they're important, joint function, joint classification, that is, so all the different kinds of joints that there are, and then synovial being one of the types of joints that there are in the body, all the different types of synovial joints that we have. And then we're going to talk about synovial joint anatomy because that's the most abundant joint that we have in our body. And then at the very end, we're going to do some MBLEx practice questions. So we're not going to be talking about bones at all in this video. You're going to have to go check that out in the skeletal system video. And I'm not going to be talking about the movements of each of the joints of the body. That I'm going to save for the kinesiology course that I will be making after the anatomy and physiology course is done. But in the meantime, make sure to check out the musculoskeletal pathologies video that I have here on YouTube. I'll have a link for that down below as well. And then it's also in my Pathologies for Bodyworkers course. It's on my website. So make sure and check out those pathologies so that you're aware of them. And then, yeah, let's go ahead and get started with first, before we get started, I want to remind you that there is a PDF associated with this video, and it's going to be on the part of the course that's going to be posted on my website. But for right now, while I'm still building the course, it's going to be in a link in the description below this video so that you can grab it. So it's just got the slideshow set up and you can see the questions and understand them more fully. So you can follow along if you want to. And also it's a great study guide. So, and I remembered one more thing I wanted to say. I wanted to say that I hope you guys have already taken an anatomy and physiology course, because this is a really, really speed overview, okay? So the real anatomy and physiology course for massage therapists is gonna be bigger and more in depth, but I just want you to know what you need to know in order to pass the MBLEx. That's what this is about. Just absorb the information. Don't worry about memorizing every detail, okay? Just absorb it. The joints are the connection points that bring the skeletal system to life, transforming structure into movement. They allow the body to bend, twist, and adapt to every action we take, from walking and reaching to giving a massage. Each joint structure determines its range of motion and stability. And understanding these relationships helps body workers apply techniques safely and effectively. So why is this important for massage therapists and body workers to know? Because it enhances your assessment skills, it supports injury prevention, and it informs the choice of techniques that promote mobility, reduce pain, and restore balance throughout the body. Okay, so the bones are the levers, the joints are the fulcrum, and we'll go into more detail about that when we get into kinesiology, about how the movement happens and at what angles they happen, there's different kinds of levers that we talk about in kinesiology. I do have a kinesiology video already posted. It's way back at the beginning of all the videos that I ever posted. So go check that out. I do explain the different kinds of levers. And so the joints would be the fulcrum, the ball in which the lever pivots. So an articulation, here's a little bit of vocabulary for you. An articulation is the place where two bones meet. It's the point where the movement occurs. It adds flexibility to the framework and it cushions your body when you're moving around. So the joint helps to cushion everything so that you don't grind those bones down. Fortunately, we don't. Okay. There are 3 different classifications of all the joints that are in our body. So I have them highlighted here, 1, 2, 3, okay? And they are separated because of their structure and their function, okay? So the structure is what kind of connective tissue is found in the joint. We have all kinds of different connective tissue. We talked about that in the tissues unit. That's unit 4. Go check that out if you haven't already. So it's just like different combinations of elastin and collagen and ground substance to create the texture and, I guess, hardiness of each of these kinds of joints. And then what kind of movement that joint allows. So the movement is associated with the kind of connective tissue it is. So if it's a really stiff connective tissue, you're not going to get as much movement. So the first one, I just wrote 3 different classification groups. The first one are not always, but usually they're associated with each other. So a fibrous joint is also a synarthrotic joint. A fibrous joint is bone ends are joined by fibrous connective tissue, okay? And then usually cartilaginous joints have fibrous cartilage between the ends and it's partially movable, which means amphiarthrotic. Okay, so amphi, meaning of both worlds. We're thinking of amphibians that can live in the water and on land, right? And arthrosis. Arthrosis or arthrotic is referring to the joints. So joints that can do both things. They can move a little bit, but not too much. And then finally, synovial, which is our favorite. We have the most joints that are synovial. It has a joint capsule with membranes which produce synovial fluid. So it's very squishy and very movable, diarthrotic. Di in this case means 2, okay? So I don't know how that's different than amphi, but whatever. So we're gonna go through these 3 different joint classifications and where we can find them on our bodies. So a fibrous joint has its bone ends are joined by a fibrous connective tissue, such as the sutures between the cranial bones and also the distal tibiofibular joint. That's not all of them, but those are good examples. Syn, for synarthrosis, syn means together, and it's mostly immovable, just a tiny bit. You know, in a lot of texts, you'll see that they are not movable, but I'm studying craniosacral therapy right now, and I have to say that they are tiny, 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 tiny bit movable. Okay, and then for cartilaginous joints, they have a fibrous cartilage between the bone ends. We already talked about that. So amphi means partially movable. So they are a great example of cartilaginous joint would be in the vertebrae. So we have these partially movable, fortunately not too movable, or we'd be pinching those nerves like crazy. So inside, I do want to mention that inside of a vertebrae, there's a special anatomy that's different than everywhere else in your body. And you have these discs that have 2 important structures inside. The annulus fibrosus is the chewy outer ring, and the nucleus pulposus is the sweet gel filling. So the outer ring is the toughness that holds everything together, absorbs all the shock, keeps you safe, keeps your nerves safe. And the gel filling is the shock absorber for when you're jumping around and having fun. So this is how I remember annulus fibrosus and nucleus pulposus. Nucleus is referring to the center, right? Obviously. Annulus means ring, okay? So that helps you remember that. And now we're going to talk about synovial joints, and that's where we're just going to spend the rest of the time on synovial joints for the rest of this chat. So it has a joint capsule. We talked about that in the membranes. We talked about it in the membranes. Maybe membranes. Oh, membranes was unit 5. And it's freely movable. And so here is the anatomy. So we got the joint capsule, which is made out of really fibrous, tough connective tissue. And then on the inside, you've got another layer of, this is like the outside membrane layer. Okay, and this, okay, so the red is the outside membrane layer, and the orange is your cartilage, your hyaline cartilage, and then the dark blue is going to be that epithelial lining that's going to secrete synovial fluid to keep those joints lubricated. Reduces friction, and also it's a medium for nutrient and waste exchange for that cartilage. The cartilage is a living thing, so we need that. All right, and of course these are the bones. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, so other structures of the synovial joint, we have ligaments. Where do we have ligaments? Over here. These little green straps are they're the little tie downs to keep your bones together, and they are made out of really fibrous leathery connective tissue. They're really tough. And then we have bursae. There's a teeny tiny little bursa right there that is protecting, let's see, which tendon is that? That would probably be the pes anserinus tendon. So it's a little bubble made out of kind of synovial fluid, and it cushions the edge of that medial epicondyle of the tibia. It cushions the tendon from that bony projection, so they don't wear through it when you're like 30 years old. So yeah, and make sure and check out that pathology section on musculoskeletal pathologies. There's a bit about bursitis in there when that gets inflamed. And then finally, the meniscus is a special cartilage. That's the fibrocartilage that protects the joint from wearing out. So there's also a meniscus in the temporomandibular joint because we talk and eat a lot. So those are the three things that you need to know, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what the complete knee joint looks like. When it's got the joint capsule around it, it's got ligaments, it's got bursa, little bursa bubbles all over it. So that knee joint has got all kinds of stuff protecting that the squishy synovial joint fluid inside. And then one other structure of a synovial joint, specifically the hip and the shoulder. That's the acetabular joint, and the glenohumeral joint is the shoulder. This green ring right here is called the labrum, and it's a cartilage ring. And then there would be a whole synovial joint capsule around the whole thing. When you have the femur in the socket, there would be a capsule around the whole thing. Okay, so we're going to talk about the 6 different types of synovial/diarthrotic joints. The shape and positioning of the articulating bones determine the direction and the variety of the movements. So first we've got the hinge joint. It operates like a hinge on a door. It goes on one plane. And for the jaw and the knee and the ankle, also the fingers, we have just flexion and extension. That's all they do. They don't do like side to side, adduction, abduction. They don't do circumduction. They just do flexion and extension. Next, we have the condyloid, which is 2 oval-shaped articular surfaces that fit into each other. So the bottom part, and it's like an oval instead of a circle. It looks like a circle in this drawing, but it's actually an oval. And so it will do some flexion and extension, just like the hinge, and it will do a little bit of side to side. So we've got the wrist, so we can do a little bit of adduction and abduction with our wrist. We can also fully flex and extend that wrist. Okay, and the same thing with the metacarpal phalangeal joints. That is the joint between your palm and your finger. So you can just hold on to your knuckle at the top of your palm or at the distal part of your palm and feel the movement there. So it's a lot of flexion and extension and a little bit of adduction and abduction. Okay, pivot joint. That's this one right here. It's a ring with a articular bone. It's a long bone with a ring around it. Okay, So that would be like, if you saw the video already with the bones, go ahead and check that out. The atlantoaxial joint has a ring, which is the atlas, and then the axis has a little bone called the odontoid process that sticks up, and it makes it so that our head can pivot side to side. So that's what it does. It does rotation. And we have saddle joints. Oh, in this image, I have the radio-ulnar joint. So we can see the radius is here, and it's, whoa, darn it. And it is fitting into a little place here on the ulna so it can twist. So it does a rotation where it twists when we supinate and pronate our wrist. Saddle joints are two saddle-shaped bones that fit into each other. And so they can do two planes very well. So flexion and extension, adduction and abduction. So the thumb, carpal metacarpal. So that is, if you go to your thumb knuckle that is most proximal towards your palm, and you slide your finger down, you have your hand on your metacarpal, your first metacarpal bone, and then you keep going down to where that metacarpal bone meets the, let's see, trapezium? I forgot, trapezoid, where it meets the trapezoid, and then you can do a full circle around that. It's almost like circumduction, but it's not, because it's not going around and around. It's just going fully from flexion, extension, and adduction and abduction. Okay. And then we have the ball and socket joint. That's this one right here. It's like a cup with a ball that fits inside. So our shoulder and hip are both ball and socket joints. And then gliding joints. Those are the joints with smooth, flat, anyway, intervertebral facets are classified as synovial or diarthrotic joints because they slide back and forth. So those are synovial joints. They have synovial fluid. When we talk about the cartilaginous joints, that is referring to the joints between the bodies of the vertebrae. Okay, time for some practice questions. We're already done with all that information. Wonderful. Which of the following correctly matches each structural type of joint with its level of movement? Oh, great, we're starting at the end. So fibrous, so we gotta match, correctly match. There's only one correct answer, okay? All right, fibrous, synarthrotic joints are freely movable. That's not true. Wait, fibrous is synarthrotic, that's one. Syn means one. Okay. Freely movable, not. They are not. Okay, so I'm going to skip that because it's just going to take too much time. Because fibrous joints are not freely movable. They're supposed to be technically immovable, like the sutures of our cranium. So fibrous synarthrotic joints are immovable, correct. Cartilaginous, amphiarthrotic, that's correct. Joints allow slight movement, and synovial diarthrotic joints are freely movable. B is 100% correct, but let's just look over these last two. Fibrous synarthrotic joints allow slight movement, not true. Fibrous synarthrotic and synovial joints both allow free movement, not true. Okay, so that would be B, circle. Okay, joint classification links structure and mobility. Fibrous joints like skull sutures are immovable. Cartilaginous joints like intervertebral discs allow limited flexibility, and synovial joints like the shoulder or knee are freely movable, allowing the greatest range of motion in the body. Which of the following statements about the structure and function of intervertebral discs is not correct? So that means there are 3 correct answers and 1 incorrect answer, and we need to identify the incorrect answer. Okay. Always make sure to find out what the question wants. Structure and function of the discs. Remember we learned about the discs? What was in there? Let's see. Annulus, fibrosis, and nucleus pulposus. Each disc consists of a tough outer ring called the annulus fibrosus that provides strength and limits excessive motion. I like that one. The nucleus pulposus in the center acts as a shock absorber, distributing pressure evenly across the spine during movement. I like that one. C, intervertebral discs are composed primarily of dense bone tissue to provide rigid protection between the vertebrae. Boo. Discs contribute to spinal flexibility while cushioning compressive forces between the vertebral bodies. Yay! C would be the incorrect. That's the one that we need to circle. Okay. Intervertebral discs are made of cartilage, not bone. Their flexible structure and outer annulus fibrosus and inner gelatinous nucleus pulposus absorbs shock, maintains spacing, and allows controlled movement in the spinal column. Okay, which of the following correctly describes a key structural feature of a synovial joint? So do you remember all the structural features of the synovial joint? Let's go through. Correctly describes. So we're looking for one correct answer. The joint cavity is filled with blood plasma to nourish articular cartilage and lubricate movement. Joint cavity is filled with blood plasma. That's not true. The joint cavity is filled with synovial fluid. So B, the articular surfaces of bones are lined with hyaline cartilage. That's true. Reducing friction and absorbing shock. Okay, I like that. So B would be the right answer, but let's just make sure. Ligaments inside the joint cavity secrete synovial fluid. No. The epithelial tissue of the synovial membrane secretes synovial fluid, not the ligaments. The ligaments hold the bones together. D, the synovial membrane forms the outermost protective layer of the joint capsule, which is not true. The tough fibrous cartilage or tough fibrous tissue joint capsule makes the protective layer of the joint capsule. So let's see. Oh, here I have listed what each of these cartilages does. The articular surfaces of bones are lined with hyaline cartilage, reducing friction and absorbing shock. I don't need that anymore. Whatever, I'm just gonna ignore it. Explanation, synovial joints feature a joint cavity filled with synovial fluid, enclosed by a capsule lined with a synovial membrane. The articular ends of the bones are covered with smooth hyaline cartilage, which cushions impact and allows pain-free motion. Essential knowledge for you guys. Okay, one more. Which of the following correctly matches the type of synovial joint with its characteristic movement? All right, remember we have 6 different movements with their characteristics that we went over. So we're looking for the one correct answer. A, hinge joint allows rotational movement. Nope. Hinge joint was only on and found at the shoulder? No. So rotational movement found at the shoulder would be the ball and socket joint. So ball and socket joint permits movement in all directions found at the hip. I like that one. That looks like a correct one. C, pivot joint allows flexion and extension found at the knee. No, the pivot joint was in the atlantoaxial joint. So it allows for full rotation. And then the saddle joint, limited to gliding motion, found between carpal bones. So saddle joint is between the carpal metacarpal, the first carpal metacarpal, that's your thumb. So that's close, but it is not limited to gliding motion. It does all the motions except rotation. So B, ball and socket joint found at the hip, permits movement in all directions. And then there's an explanation there, and that's where we're gonna leave off. And I guess next I'm gonna be going into the muscular system, the skeletal muscular system, and that's gonna be a biggie. I haven't even looked into it yet, but you will find out more soon. So with that, thank you so much for watching. Make sure and subscribe. Make sure and give this video a thumbs up. Make sure and get your PDF. I'm giving you all kinds of jobs to do. And watch all the videos. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Toodaloo.